They say a story is only as good as its villain. Throughout cinematic history, we've been subjected to many sinister antagonists. Typical blockbusters today rely heavily on rich businessmen or celestial warmongers to drive their stories, but they can often come off as rather shallow. It's a fairly standard setup. Good guy has a problem, they defeat the bad guy to solve it. In many other cases, it's a lot more complicated than that. Creating a great antagonist in film depends on a combination of factors: the threat they pose, their on-screen presence, and the actor playing them. There are many fine examples to choose from: Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Norman Bates from Psycho, Annie Wilkes from Misery, Clarence Boddicker from RoboCop, and more recently, Heath Ledger's Joker. These villains all have one thing in common: they have no superpowers or generic motives. They're simply awful human beings, and that makes for brilliant conflict. By being based in a more realistic setting, antagonists can create a more unrelenting presence. We feel these people really could exist, and that makes them much scarier. One of the most deceitful and horrifying villains I've ever seen in a film came in 1991's Cape Fear. I watched it recently and was transfixed by the monster at its centre. How did Scorsese do it? What makes Max Cady such a terrifying individual? Why does he still stand out today? Let's take a look. Like many great movies, the audience connects with Max Cady before he says any lines. The visceral score by Elmer Bernstein swells as we see the incarcerated antagonist from behind. His physique is strong, but the violent tattoos on his back tell a different story. Cady's views are religious but also nihilistic. He's both well-read and locked into a single goal, one we'll soon learn on his release from prison. Most will notice the storm clouds gathering as Cady walks free. This man is an unstoppable force who will never stop until his vengeance is satisfied. The object of his obsession is soon revealed. Sam Bowden, played by Nick Nolte, is a professional lawyer who defended Cady years earlier. By withholding evidence about his victim, Max was sent to prison for 14 years and was subjected to great abuse on the inside. In spite of his reading and education, he's unquestionably a psychopath, and much of Cape Fear presents this to us both visually and audibly. Bowden certainly isn't blameless himself. He cheats on his wife, neglects to spend time with his daughter, and dismisses the concerns of those beneath him. This change made by the film's director is very different from the 1962 original, inching the tone towards more morally grey territory. The 1991 remake makes a liberal use of reddish lighting and colour. It represents the rage inside Cady and the violent lengths he is willing to go towards revenge. The second way Cape Fear builds its villain is through build-up. The intensity and deep hatred between our two leads is a slow burn in the first act. At first, Max Cady appears to be a mere nuisance, disrupting a film viewing with his gratuitous laughter and appearing in places he shouldn't. This shot of Cady sitting on the Bowden's wall with fireworks going off in the background speaks volumes of his unyielding presence. He's snooping around the Bowden family, watching them like a hawk. You feel as if he's slowly putting a picture together, remaining just on the edge of law-abiding society. We soon learn that's exactly the case, as the villain exploits countless loopholes to get through to his prey. From here, Sam tries to fight back with his own methods, but that only makes things worse. No matter how many times he tries to delay or stop Max, he just keeps on coming. This predator is practically immune to both intervention by the law and attempts at intimidation. On one side, the frustration builds, and on the other, a determination for revenge slowly heightens. This escalation drives the film forward. One moment, Max is approaching the young Danielle Bowden in an incredibly uncomfortable scene, and the next, Sam hires a group of thugs to beat him up. The two are locked in a desperate struggle, and as the danger increases, Sam and Max gradually switch places. When they first interact, Sam stands above the former convict, aloof in his superior position. Many years have passed since the two met in court, and our protagonist has become too comfortable in his life. By the end of the film, the protagonist is tied up and vulnerable, at the mercy of the man he put away years earlier. He's dragged down to Max's level with little means of escape. Last but not least, we have the man in the lead role. Robert De Niro's outstanding performance marked a major departure from his typical gangster roles. His nomination for Best Actor at the time was well deserved. Much like the aforementioned build-up, Cady's demeanour is careful and calculated. He plays his part in society, all the while inching closer to the Bowdens. This manifests when he goes after Sam's lover, Laurie. We see his manipulative side on full display. He appears charming at first, only unleashing his full fury when he has his victim right where he wants them. In the film's latter half, the Bowdens hatch a plan, and they expect it to run like clockwork. Bait Cady into their home and shoot him in self-defense. As we see, the villain makes a complete mockery of this scheme and murders a private investigator before slipping away. At this point, we're just as fearful as the Bowden family. By keeping Max out of view in this sequence, the sinking feeling that he could be anywhere is palpable. The delight he takes in tormenting his victims is present, even when the actor isn't directly in front of the camera. That's something very few villains have accomplished. It all culminates in Cady's master stroke. He finally corners Sam on his boat on the titular river, intent on torturing and killing his family. The way he turns to look us straight in the eye at several points is deeply unnerving, as is the makeup work when he's burned by Danielle. By the end, the two men are reduced to crazed animals battling to the death. It's Sam who finally loses his mind here, while the villain is well in his element. As he finally drowns in the river, Cady starts speaking in tongues and singing hysterically. It's an almost demonic presence that looks to haunt Sam for the rest of his days. But that final deathly stare from De Niro before he sinks is what really sticks with us. The venomous hatred Cady had towards Bowden was with him all the way to the grave, and it will also be etched in our own minds long after watching. In a way, Max succeeded in his sadistic goal, as Danielle acknowledges their lives will never be the same again. Through these cinematic techniques, Max Cady has gone down as a monstrous antagonist, one who embodied the film he appeared in and became the most memorable part of an already well-produced release. Few things are as terrifying as an individual who wants nothing more than to make you suffer. Many modern villains across multiple genres today are unmemorable or otherwise disposable, but when the bad guy does leave a mark, audiences never forget. Thanks for watching. Cape Fear's harrowing conflict left audiences breathless 30 years ago, and it hasn't lost its brutal impact. Which villains of cinema do you remember the most? Let me know in the comments below. You can follow my blog and channel at the links in the description.